Hello and welcome to the local campaign Kitchener-Conestoga debate. I'm your moderator, Dan Polishchuk. The candidates participating in tonight's debate are in no particular order. Well, in fact, they're ordered by last name, in fact. Harold Albrecht, representing the Conservative Party of Canada. Stephanie Gertz, representing the Green Party of Canada. Tim Lewis, representing the Liberal Party of Canada. Colton Waller, representing the People's Party of Canada. And Riani Devet, representing the NDP. To start things off, we will have a 2-minute opportunity for each candidate to deliver their opening remarks. So with that in mind, we will begin with Mr. Albrecht.
Good evening. I'm Harold Albrecht, your Conservative candidate for Kitchener-Conestoga. Life in Canada has become unaffordable. Over the past 4 years, under the leadership of Justin Trudeau's Liberals, nearly 50% of Canadians are within $200 of insolvency every single month. Because of their hard work, Canadians are able to get by, but many are not able to get ahead. That's why a Conservative government under the leadership of Andrew Scheer will put you first and make decisions to help you get ahead. We've already introduced several measures that will put more money directly into your pocket. The universal tax credit will give the average Canadian family over $800 more per year to spend on home renovations, a trip, or to put into savings. The child fitness and arts tax credit will save Canadians 15% of the total cost of those programs and activities. The transit tax credit will reduce the overall cost of your monthly transit pass, a cost-saving measure that was cancelled by the Liberal government. Kitchener-Conestoga residents are eager to see the removal of GST from home heating costs. In Canada, heating your home isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. When it's 30 below, you shouldn't have to decide between putting food on your table or heating your home. That's why we'll remove tax on those bills, leaving more money at the end of the month. Over the past 13 years, we've met at fall fairs, fish fries, firemen's breakfasts, Christmas parades, in my office and at your doors. My priorities have been clear: listening to you, providing assistance through my office, and representing your voices in Ottawa. Canada should be a country where no ambition is too big and where no dream is out of reach. We should be a principled force for peace and freedom on the world stage, a disciplined protector of your tax dollars at home, a welcoming land of refuge for the world's persecuted and afflicted, and a proud champion for clean Canadian technology. It's been my honor to serve as your Member of Parliament, and I'm asking once again for your support for experienced leadership here in Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Mr. Albrecht. Ms. Gertz.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Stephanie Gertz, and I'm the Green Party candidate for Kitchener-Conestoga. As a mom of two, I got into politics not because I couldn't sit back and watch the political infighting destroy the future for our children and our grandchildren. We all know as a parent when we have no choice but to step up, to take charge, and do what needs to get done. As an entrepreneur, I've seen the struggles of small businesses getting off the ground, and I've felt the disappointment of not-for-profits when their funding is getting cut. I strongly feel we need to bring stability into our current government. We need a system that looks forward to the future, that creates stable jobs, and not just promises that politicians are not keeping. As a former police officer, I'm used to showing leadership in the stressful situations where if nothing gets done, disaster can happen. We're at a critical point in our government. Right now, if we do nothing in the next 4 years, it's going to decide the future for our children and for our grandchildren. By choosing the Conservatives, you're moving backwards. By choosing the Liberals, you're staying the same. And by choosing Green, you're moving forward. Thank you. Vote Green.
Thank you, Ms. Gertz. Mr. Lewis.
I'm Tim Lewis, your Liberal candidate. I've lived in the Forest Heights area of Kitchener for the past 25 years, where my wife Brenda and I are raising our 2 children. I'm a professional musician. I work hard to earn a living for my family, and we know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. As a Canadian, I think that everyone should have the opportunity to reach their full potential. I'm running to be your Member of Parliament because I believe every person in our community deserves to be represented. And over the past 4 years, I've knocked on your doors in Kitchener, Wilmot, Wellesley, and Woolwich to listen to your concerns. What I'm hearing is, after 13 years in Ottawa, many of you are feeling ignored by your current MP. Many of you are feeling like your Member of Parliament doesn't represent your values. I want to change that. So what are my values? Well, for one, I believe that protecting the environment and growing the economy go hand in hand, and it's up to us to lead the fight against climate change. I believe we need to keep working hard to make life more affordable for everyday Canadians, and that you don't do that by focusing on the top 1%. You do that by lowering taxes for the middle class, putting more money in the pockets of Canadian families through our Canada Child Benefit. I believe in supporting and standing for women's reproductive rights and for LGBTQ rights. And I believe in helping seniors by giving them the support they need for the retirement they deserve. This election, we have an important choice to make. Keep moving forward and build on the progress we've made these last 4 years, or go back to the policies of tax cuts for the rich and cuts for the services for the rest of us. I'm for moving forward for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Waller.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Colton Waller. I'm your People's Party candidate for Kitchener-Conestoga. The People's Party, also known as the PPC, is the fastest growing political party in Canada today. We also are the newest political party in this country. The People's Party of Canada was founded on 4 principles: respect, fairness, personal responsibility, and freedom. These are the principles on which Canada was founded. These are the principles on which our country has grown. And these are the principles which we would like to see Canada abide by going forward into the future. Now, you might not have heard of the People's Party, and you may wonder why that is. It's because of the media bias. The media bias stems from the fact that the People's Party is the only party that rejects political correctness. We are not afraid to discuss any topic openly and truthfully. This is what separates us from the other parties. We still tell the truth, which the other parties have given up on a long time ago. The People's Party wants to make things better for all Canadians. This includes a drastic tax cut for the middle class, 15% for $15,000 to $100,000 per year. We also seek to reform our immigration system to ensure that the people who come to Canada have the skills that are in demand here and won't go without a job and have to stay in a shelter in the large cities. If you hear something tonight that interests you or resonates within you, I encourage you to go to the People's Party website and compare our policies to the other parties and see that we are the ones that are offering a common sense revolution. Together, we'll take Ottawa back and make it work for the people once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waller. Ms. DeVette.
Hi, my name is Riani DeVette, and I'm your NDP candidate for Kitchener-Conestoga. Election after election, we keep switching between the 2 major parties, and every time they manage to disappoint us. It always comes down to the same thing. While they ridicule the people-centered policies of the NDP as unrealistic and unaffordable, they're always able to find a few stray billions to pay for a $14 billion corporate tax tax break, or a $1 billion bailout for Bombardier. They're able to turn a blind eye to the loopholes in our tax laws that allow the rich and the wealthy to stash $350 billion in offshore accounts, thereby denying us of services that would have helped to make regular people's lives just a little bit more affordable, help them get ahead just a little bit more, and ease their load just a little bit. My mother taught me that if I don't like the way things are going, I have one of 2 choices. I can sit down and be quiet, or I can stand up and do something about it. Well, I don't like the way things are going, and I'm not going to sit down and be quiet. I'm going to stand up and fight for you. I'm standing up with the NDP to fight for a Canada that is more affordable for everybody, to fight for the strengthening and the improvement of Medicare, and to fight the climate crisis. I'm not running for the benefit of big corporations or the well-connected. I'm running to speak out for justice, to speak out for fairness, and to speak out for those who cannot speak for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeVette, and thank you to all the candidates again for your opening remarks. We'll now move on to the question and answer portion of the debate. Questions will be posed by 570 News reporter Mark Perry and Greater KW Chamber of Commerce Vice President Art Sinclair. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. Once all candidates have had a chance to respond, we will have a few minutes of open debate on the topic at hand. So our first question comes from Mark Perry.
All right, and this is obviously a lot open questions here. So the first question would be, if elected, what is your first priority to tackle as a member of Parliament for Kitchener-Conestoga that focuses more locally? Yeah, the biggest thing that you would focus on locally.
And the first response, we'll give the first crack to Ms. Gertz.
Oh, hello. The first thing I would focus on locally would be protection of our environment. But our environment encompasses many things, such as clean water, affordability for farmers, making sure that we are benefiting everyone into the food network. So I mean, it's all encompassing. The environment is not something as simple as trees or as earth or water or air. But it'd have to be working with other parties to ensure that the environment is the top priority.
Mr. Lewis?
I would agree with you as far as environment, and I would add infrastructure as well, because those two can go hand in hand. We need to invest in local infrastructure to protect against climate change and also for roads, public roads, swimming pools, and community hockey rinks. The infrastructure that we need. We've already spent, there are 29 projects that the government has spent in the last 4 years, $140 million of federal investment already. We want to make sure that continues to come for our riding in Kitchener-Conestoga.
And Mr. Waller, your thoughts?
So locally, the first thing I would do if I was your member of Parliament would be to extend the allowed capital costs, the capital cost allowance from manufacturing industry to all sectors of the economy. What this allows people to do is they can write off new equipment and machinery faster than they normally would. And this spurs business investment and business growth ridiculously. There's no reason why this can't happen in Kitchener-Conestoga and make it an even greater place for business to be done. That's what's important. That's what needs to be done in this riding. Thank you.
And Ms. DeWitt?
Thank you. I think one of my first concerns would be water. We are facing a problem in our own area where water is under threat. Some of our groundwater is being explored for the possibility of aggregate mining on top of that well water, putting a serious risk in terms of the cleanliness and the fitness for human consumption of at least 7% of the Waterloo region's drinking water. There are laws and regulations that protect our water, but these seem to be up for sale to the highest bidder. And my first priority would be to strengthen all laws and regulation to make sure that we have safe and clean drinking water for this generation and the generations to come.
And last response to you, Mr. Albrecht.
Thank you. My priorities will be the same as they have been for the last 13 years. My first priority is to serve the constituents of Kitchener-Conestoga. Hundreds, if not thousands, of constituents have come to my office for assistance on issues varying from immigration to Canada Revenue Agency, taxation issues, employment insurance, passports, and so on. So that's my greatest joy and my current job, and it will continue to be my current job after I'm elected. In addition to that, I think we need to continually focus on making life more affordable. This obviously applies all across Canada, but it applies here in Kitchener-Conestoga. As I'm hearing at the doors, going door to door, affordability, especially housing affordability, is one of the key concerns of many people my age who are watching their kids unable to qualify for mortgages because of the recent stress tests that were introduced by the Liberal government that made it almost impossible. So affordability and also continuing to serve my constituents in the way that I have in the past 13 years.
And we provide this opportunity now to jump in terms of those last thoughts, where you'd like. Again, please indicate with a raised hand if you would like to jump in at any point. And we do emphasize that we do have more, I think, more robust discussion if we avoid talking over each other. So I just want to emphasize that point as well. So, Mr. Albright, I suppose as the incumbent, where do you stand on the current track record of the Liberal government at this point? Well,
one of the key issues that was raised by my Liberal opponent was the issue of environment. And it's fine to talk about environment, it's fine to talk about a price on pollution, but I have asked my colleagues in Parliament, my Liberal colleagues in Parliament, I've asked probably a dozen times in the past number of years, where was the price on pollution when the government of Montreal was allowed to dump 8 billion litres of raw sewage into the St. Lawrence River? I don't recall there being any price on pollution. In fact, as I said, I've asked that question at least a dozen times in Parliament of Liberal colleagues, and they have never once been able to answer that. So it's fine to talk about a price on pollution, but let's make it realistic. If we're talking about pollution, let's include our air, our land, and our water.
And Mr. Lewis, how then would you respond to those questions, which have been asked numerous times, as Mr. Albrecht has indicated?
Sure, I would say there's no more issue important than climate change, and that's why the Liberal Party has a strong plan to protect the environment and grow the economy at the same time. Pollution is no longer free, and at the same time we've managed to create more than 1 million jobs, most of which are full-time. So we're taking actions to reduce emissions and adapt to climate change in many sectors, in industry, in buildings, in transportation, and in agriculture.
Fair enough. We'll turn now to Mr. Sinclair to provide the next question to all candidates.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. Candidates, polling data across Canada is indicating that the #1 issue for voters is health care. And the polling data is also indicating that no one particular party is getting a lot of support for their proposals to address the problems in the system. So this is your opportunity to tell the voters of Kitchener-Conestoga, #1, what are the problems in the system, and #2, what will your party do to correct them?
And again, we turn back to Mr. Lewis for the first response.
Sure. Canadians are very proud of their publicly funded health care here in Canada, and the Liberal government is strengthening that with transformative investments already. This includes an unprecedented $11 billion to support home care and to support mental health. In addition to that, about $40 billion is being provided through a Canada Health transfer, and that's $4 billion more than the Conservatives in the previous years in government. So the Liberal government has remained committed to working with the provinces and territories to ensure that our health care remains a point of pride for Canadians well into the future.
Mr. Waller, your thoughts?
So the Canadian healthcare system is pretty good. There are a lot of things to be praised about it, but there's also a lot wrong with it. And the main issue that's wrong with the Canadian healthcare system is that the federal government interferes in it way too much. Healthcare is provincial jurisdiction. And in recent years, the federal government, under both Justin Trudeau and Stephen Harper, have interfered in the provincial jurisdiction more and more. The People's Party of Canada would replace the health transfer with a tax point system, and we would remove GST entirely on a federal level and let the provinces fill that fiscal room so they can raise the funds for healthcare. And for those provinces that would be worse off without the health transfer, we would provide them funds so that everybody has the equal level of service that they need. Fundamentally, it's an issue about respecting the Constitution and letting provinces do the work within their own jurisdiction. Thank you.
And Ms. DeWitt, on a topic that's very close to the NDP.
It is very close to the NDP, and it's also close to me because my background in activism is in healthcare, and we have an amazing healthcare system in Canada. And being from the party of Tommy Douglas, it is so close to our hearts, but it also has its flaws. And one of the flaws is that when our Medicare was introduced, it was always meant as a first step towards a comprehensive wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling healthcare system. And unfortunately, through successive Conservative and Liberal governments, not only have they not expanded our healthcare, but although the budgets, provincially and federally, keep increasing in nominal amounts every year, it does not keep pace with inflation, it does not keep pace with our growing population, and it does not account for an aging population that needs more care.
Your party was just mentioned, Mr. Albrecht. Your thoughts on the topic?
As my colleague pointed out, the healthcare system is primarily under provincial jurisdiction. However, there are large amounts of transfer money that come from the federal government each year. The Conservative Party is committed to increasing those transfers by 3% per year over the next term. One of my big concerns, and has been for the past number of years, is palliative care. I've done a lot of work on the need for increased palliative care in Canada, and the Liberal government, in their last campaign, promised a $3 billion investment into palliative care. We haven't seen any of that funding. So my concern is that we improve our amount of money that we're putting into palliative care and increasing the efficiency of that. Having said all of that, I want to say that I think our healthcare system is doing a great job. I recently was the recipient of some of that healthcare. I know the quality of people that are on the front lines doing their work. We can do better, and we will do the best we can.
And Ms. Gertz.
I think our healthcare system, and from when I'm getting a lot of emails and conversations from people, is our healthcare system is amazing. We're very proud of it as Canadians. However, it's broken. It's looking at reactive measures instead of proactive measures. It's looking at how do we expedite time and energy in hospitals and doctors' appointments and clinics. We're not looking at how do we prevent these things. And then we also need to look at the causes of health issues, illnesses, such as the Health Organization stated that the climate change is the greatest challenge to 21st century healthcare. Public health associations from across Canada are stating climate as leading for illness for seniors and children. So we need to be more aware of this. We need to make sure that we are taking things for mental health, anything from children to seniors, but be more proactive instead of reactive.
So Ms. David, I go back to you in terms of opening our open discussion on the topic, and from what you're hearing from the other candidates, would you agree that it follows along the lines of maybe that second or third step that you were saying that began with that first step taken by Tommy Douglas back all those years ago?
Absolutely. When people are lying in $1,500 a day beds in hospital because they couldn't afford to pay $200 or $300 a month for medicine, that is indicative of the problem. So if we have proper pharmacare, then we will have more beds available in hospital and we will free up a lot more money. When people are at increased risk of heart disease because they can't afford to get dental treatment, that is putting an extra strain on our healthcare system. So if we include dental care, that will ease up time in the hospitals, but it will also end up costing us less. When people's mobility and ability to work and study is impaired because of eye problems, that puts a strain on our economy. So having eye care as part of our Medicare would benefit not just individuals, but it would also benefit employers and the economy.
And Ms. Gertz, I see you nodding your head quite a bit there in agreement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I respect you, and I totally agree with what she's saying. I think there's a lot of preemptive things that we should be doing and recognizing the importance of the federal government playing a role in.
And Mr. Albrecht, first response to you there.
Just in speaking to the daily cost of hospital bed, that's exactly what I'm getting at when I'm talking about palliative care. If we could remove that person from the acute bed facility into either a hospice or home care, we could cut the cost dramatically. In fact, I think it's $1,500 down to about $900 for hospice, down to about $300 for home care. These would be an incredible savings, but more importantly, it would open up the beds for those who actually need it for acute care.
Mr. Waller, an opportunity for you here to jump in.
The other candidates on the stage here have some great ideas for healthcare. They've got a long list of normative statements about what we should do to improve the healthcare system. The problem is that none of it is costed, none of it at all. They don't explain where they're going to get the money from, and one can only assume that you'd have to raise taxes or take out more loans at the level of the federal government. And that's something that this country can't handle anymore. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, opportunity here for, you've heard a lot of opinions here and a lot of thoughts.
One of the things that Ms. DeWitt mentioned was pharmacare, which is a very important thing. People shouldn't have to make a choice between medicine or food. And that's an important thing. We've got an amazing healthcare system, universal healthcare, but we don't have a system of pharmacare, and that's something we need to move forward and to get there. We're going to work closely with the provinces and the territories, Indigenous governments, representative organizations, and work together to move forward toward a national pharmacare program. I look forward to talking more about that in the near future.
All right, Mr. Perry, we'll turn to you once more for our third question of the night.
Well, it kind of actually just follows up on those statements and working with the provincial government to get a lot of these things tackled. But there's been a lot of, it's a little bit of tension, I guess, between the Liberal government at the federal level as well as the provincial government here in Ontario, and more specifically, of course, Premier Doug Ford. I guess, what if you were at the table in Ottawa, basically, or wanting to work with the provincial government, how would you want to improve provincial-federal relations to, I guess, tackle a lot of these issues that we've been seeing?
So on the topic of bridge building, if you will, Mr. Waller, you have the first response.
So we need to respect the concept of confederation, period. Provinces have certain jurisdictions, the federal government has certain jurisdictions. The province isn't in charge of military, the federal government is. The federal government's not in charge of healthcare, that's the province's job. We would stop interfering in the provincial jurisdiction, except for pipelines. We would use the Constitution to impose a pipeline on British Columbia and Quebec. However, that's how you improve relations with the provinces. You stop stepping on their toes and stop telling them what to do.
Ms. DeWitt?
It's funny how we can step on over the Confederation in things that will harm people, but we can't do it in things that will benefit people. In terms of reconciliation, and specifically in our province, I think the first step is to reach out to the provincial government. And as you so artfully put in the question, this is an issue that is number one for most people. And I think while the Conservative government in Ontario are making misstep after misstep, I also think they are not deaf to the frustration of people, that people don't agree with the cuts they're making, and to urge them to listen to the voice of people. The other thing is to just be forceful about explaining that these things cost money in the setup, but they save an incredible amount of money in the long run. And it's time that we stop being penny wise and pound foolish.
And your thoughts, Mr. Albrecht?
Well, it's obvious to me that the current Liberal government in Ottawa has gone out of their way to actually stick their finger in the eyes of many of our provincial counterparts. When it comes to imposing a carbon tax, which was definitely out of their jurisdiction, these are things that they should be left up to the province to do. And I'm disappointed to hear that there's so many of our Liberal colleagues who think this current government is doing a great job of provincial relationships, and because they're having meetings. Having a meeting does nothing. What you need to do is sit down and actually hammer out what are the decisions that can be made collaboratively together.
Ms. Gertz, would you agree or disagree on that point as you touch that topic?
Yeah, I think the Green Party really stands firm on the idea of municipalities, provincial government, and federal government working more hand in hand. I think in order for the federal government to make wise choices, they need to be more aware of what's happening in the municipal in the provincial level. That in order to understand anything about food, water, air, jobs, economy, I can't see how expecting the federal government to make smart choices when they're working up here, when there's so many other things that are happening down here that they're not even aware of. And so we've seen that with Ford government making choices that drastically impacts the people within the province and not really truly understanding the impact. So I would say that, the federal government needs to work closely with all levels.
And Mr. Lewis?
Well, especially in Ontario, the provincial cuts, they hurt Canadians. And when they're doing them, in part seems to be to spite the federal government. And there's money on the table from the federal government to try and get jobs and creation infrastructure projects gone, and the Conservatives provincially have stalled that as a matter of spite. That's not productive. Absolutely do need to sit down and talk with these provinces. That is the first step. And as far as pricing pollution, the courts have repeatedly said that that is the right way, and there is jurisdiction there for the federal government to do that, to make sure that the jobs throughout the country are kept.
And Mr. Waller, you wanted to jump in there for a moment.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. This is a federal debate, and we're talking an awful lot about what Ontario is doing wrong. I think we need to get it back on track here and talk about things that are important at the federal level.
So what would you pinpoint as the major things then?
Immigration. The People's Party wants to reform the immigration system. Canada, the net immigration levels to Canada are extreme. Per capita, we accept 3 times more immigrants than the United States does. That's 330,000 people a year. And just to put that in perspective, that's the province of Nova Scotia every year. This is unsustainable, economically speaking, and it's also unsustainable when it comes to integration. People don't have enough time or incentive to integrate into Canadian society, our values, and our economy. The People's Party would drastically reform the immigration system, and we would lower the net migration levels to between 100 and 150,000 people a year, based on economic needs. Right now, only a quarter of immigrants that Canada accepts are under the economic category, which is the classic myth that Canada only accepts people who have skills, are educated, etc. The People's Party would only accept people in the economic category. Majority, if not all, would be from the economic category, to ensure that when they come to Canada, they have skills that are in demand and they can find an income easily. And
Mr. Lewis, with your party being currently in power, and going back to that topic of bridge building, essentially, are there any sort of similarities in his response and what you're hearing from the other candidates too?
As far as immigration?
Correct. Well, not only that, but other areas that you could find similarities to improve what's happening in our country.
Yeah. In regards to immigration, our government understands that immigration plays an important role in driving the economy and has contributed to the success of our country. And we're proud of our immigration plan, which contributes to the economic growth and attracts some of the world's most talented individuals, and it reunites families, and it's resettling vulnerable refugees. The Canadians I speak to are proud of Canada for opening their arms, taking in immigrants and families. And with an aging population, that's going to be very important that we address these demographic changes and the labor market shortages that we have right now. So we believe in a fair and a simple immigration system, and that's the key to attracting these people, and we're willing to work and continue working with the provinces to make sure that it happens in the best possible way.
And Ms. DeVette?
Thank you very much. The NDP fully agrees that our immigration system cannot be a free-for-all. We need to have clear rules, we need to have goals. But what concerns me is when I hear comments about the lack or the inability of immigrants to integrate and assimilate, about their culture and accepting Canadian culture and values. I am an immigrant, and so is my husband. But my husband's surname is Ramon, and he speaks English with a distinct accent, and his skin is slightly darker than mine. Now, these are things that will never, ever be thrown in my face. But yet these are the types of perceptions and prejudices that he has to face. So I would really like, if we're going to have future discussions about immigration, that we remove the concept of people's values and ability to integrate into our society out of that discussion, because there is prejudice in that. Thank you.
And Mr. Albrecht, you wanted to jump in there?
I want to say one of the favorite parts of my job as your member of parliament is attending citizenship ceremonies where new Canadians are now, they've been here long enough, they become Canadian citizens, they take the oath of citizenship. And to watch the look on their faces and to think about the possible number of different stories that each of them could tell as to how they came here or why they came here. And when it comes to refugee settlement, I want you to know that the Conservative Party is committed to refugee settlement. We're committed to a refugee settlement that increases the ability for the refugees to integrate. I've had refugees living in my home. We found them jobs, we found them a place to live, we helped them get OHIP coverage, all of the things that go with acclimatizing to Canadian culture. And for someone to actually have a good opportunity to succeed in Canadian culture, they need that personal care, either from an individual or a family or possibly a church group that's going to walk alongside them for up to a year or more. These refugees that I'm speaking of, some have become some of our closest friends. And I am so honored that we can be part of that. What concerns me in the current situation with immigration is the 40,000 plus illegal immigrants that have come into Canada, have jumped the queue, costing us millions, if not billions of dollars. And that's a small problem compared to the fact that they have now replaced many legitimate refugees who are sitting in UNHCR camps, who have been processed, who should be coming to Canada, but their places aren't available because someone else has jumped the queue. We want a system that is fair and compassionate and orderly. That's what the Conservative Party will achieve.
Quick 15 seconds to you, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, I want to set the record straight. There was some misinformation there. There is no queue. Immigration and refugees are separate issues, and my colleague might have forgotten that. But in 2015, Canadians made a choice to move forward. The previous government was the one that had two-tier citizenship. I'm an immigrant myself, and I had a barbaric culture snitch line. So Canadians have moved past that, and we're proud of that.
That was never implemented. It was a suggestion from one person. It was never implemented, and my colleague is creating a situation that is not true.
We're running short on this topic. Mr. Warren, a quick word for you.
Yeah, no problem. People's Party is going to stop the people jumping the border in the United States. Roxham Road, we'll fence it off, and we'll give the funds necessary to the Canadian Border Service so that they can stop people coming over.
We move on to Mr. Sinclair with his next question of the evening now.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I guess as all of you are aware, Waterloo Region is a growing community. We have a number of businesses that are hiring in all sectors, particularly the technology sector, where there are a lot of people that are coming here that are at the very early stages of their career, recent university graduates, and the point they're either thinking about buying a house for the first time or ready to do it right now. So what are your proposals in terms, and we've had this mentioned briefly, what are your proposals in terms of housing affordability? Because this is a big concern of a lot of employers across the Waterloo region, is their ability to attract people here because of the price of housing here, which, as we all know, has escalated pretty significantly in the last 5 or 6 years. So what are your proposals around housing affordability?
And with that, we'll begin with Ms. DeVette for that.
Thank you. The NDP is proposing to create 500,000 housing units within the next 10 years, half of which within the next 5 years. These housing units will be affordable, but they will also be quality units. Some of it will be through incentives to help the new building projects in the affordability spectrum. Some of it will be assistance to homeowners in terms of their closing costs. But another issue that we're also looking at is it's not just about building new homes. It's about transforming what we currently have and looking at not just the traditional models of home ownership or rental, but also incorporating models like cooperative housing units. And I know that this is a particular issue in our region, not just in terms of a shortage of housing, but we're also facing a growing number of people who are living in uptown and downtown areas where there's gentrification, and